In 1947, Western Europe faced a singular, overwhelming policy challenge. The Soviet Union was rapidly expanding its territory westward. The continent was severed by a physical and ideological barrier that Winston Churchill described as an iron curtain. The threat materialized in February of 1948. In Prague, armed communist militias, backed by Moscow, seized control of the government, proving that Soviet-backed takeovers were a functional reality. The United States formalized the doctrine of containment. This strategy aimed to halt Soviet influence through long-term, vigilant defense. National Security Council Resolution NSC 10/2 provided the highly classified authorization for this mission. It gave the CIA the power to conduct espionage, sabotage, and covert paramilitary operations on foreign soil. Military leaders believed that standard deterrence was no longer enough. The West required an invisible, preemptive line of defense, buried deep within its own borders. NATO established a web of highly classified networks across the continent. They were known by various names: Gladio in Italy, Absalon in Denmark, and Plan Bleu in France. This diagram illustrates the stay-behind concept, a fully armed, dormant paramilitary structure designed to activate only after a country has been conquered by an enemy force. To deter Soviet occupation, NATO engineered these secret armies, but maintaining them required parallel, shadow infrastructures that eventually mutated from defensive deterrence into offensive political weapons. Analyzing this architecture and the systemic corruption required to fund it reveals the foundational blueprint for modern hybrid warfare. To understand how democratic systems are subverted today, we have to reverse engineer the shadow states built decades ago. To build a secret army during peacetime, Western intelligence turned to the guerrilla tactics perfected during the Second World War. They studied the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, and its specialized Section D, created under the authority of Winston Churchill. During the war, the SOE specialized in dropping operatives behind German lines to conduct targeted sabotage, secure exfiltration routes, and wage psychological warfare. The defining feature of the SOE was its structural isolation. It operated with total separation from the standard military hierarchy to preserve its secrets. This isolated cell structure became the exact blueprint Western intelligence used to design their Cold War sleeper cells. NATO's challenge was scale. They had to replicate a wartime guerrilla model across multiple sovereign, allied nations, while those nations were officially at peace. 2 coordination hubs were created: the Allied Clandestine Committee and the Clandestine Plan Committee. This expanded diagram shows the resulting command hierarchy. The CIA and British MI6 provided the black budget funding and specialized training. That support flowed down to host nation intelligence agencies. Agencies like France's SDCE or Belgium's SDRA-8 managed the local sleeper cells and handled the recruitment of civilian operatives. This architecture created a massive, multinational secret army that remained invisible to the democratic parliaments that governed those nations. By the late 1940s, operational priorities shifted. Intelligence agencies focused their surveillance and resources on democratically elected domestic communist parties. In 1945, the French Communist Party won 26% of the vote. In Italy, the Communist Party enjoyed immense popularity due to its leading role in the wartime resistance. To actively counter this, the stay-behind networks adopted covert psychological warfare tactics designed to fully neutralize internal political movements. In France, René Pleven established the Action Political Office. It was tasked with state-sponsored counter-propaganda and the deliberate subversion of domestic politics through funding anti-communist groups. By targeting domestic political parties, the stay-behind networks moved from defensive military contingency into offensive political warfare against their own citizens. Funding and protecting a vast off-the-books paramilitary force created an immense structural problem. The secret services had to find a way to operate without the host government discovering the network. The final requirement was a parallel state, a layer of influence designed to shield the command nodes from democratic oversight. In Italy, this shield was the clandestine P2 Masonic Lodge, led by Alessio Gelli. Gelli functioned as the vital bridge. He connected Italian military intelligence to untraceable black budget financing through the Banco Ambrosino. This lack of oversight culminated in the strategy of tension. Networks artificially escalated domestic terror to justify authoritarian crackdowns and neutralize political opposition. In 1980, the Bologna train station massacre, a terrorist bombing linked to these covert structures, killed 85 people. In Turkey, the network's counter-guerrilla branch directly participated in the 1980 military coup, overthrowing the state it was meant to protect. In order to protect the state from Harnism, the shadow infrastructure required to run the stay-behind networks had effectively hijacked the state itself. When we look at this complete systems architecture, the structural flaw becomes clear. An unaccountable, highly funded covert subsystem within a democracy will inevitably act to preserve its own interests over the state. This historical mutation provides the exact blueprint for the modern doctrine of hybrid warfare. Modern hybrid warfare operates through these same channels: the saturation of digital spaces with disinformation and the exploitation of internal political divisions to achieve state objectives without open combat. The stay-behind networks provided the foundational model for this kind of subversion, creating a prototype for the conflicts we face today. The secrecy surrounding these networks finally collapsed in 1990. Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti stood before Parliament and admitted the existence of the secret army known as Gladio. This admission sent a shockwave through the democratic institutions of Europe. Parliamentary inquiries across the continent began to uncover, investigate, and dismantle their own clandestine networks. The investigation proved that these secret structures had operated for 40 years with almost no oversight from the governments they were sworn to serve. The Cold War stay-behind networks provided a functional blueprint for covert domestic warfare, a system that outlasted the specific Soviet threat it was built to counter.